Ausgezeichnet.
It looks like a Romanian crest. Electropencil, more electropencil. Wow. What we have here is an Austrian Steyr Hahn with a Romanian slide and probably 2 or 3 other guns worth of parts in it. Lot of work needed here. There was pitting. It looks like it was Parkerized, which I most certainly assure you this gun was never Parkerized. Let's get down a rabbit hole, tear this thing apart, deal with the orange ooze that's coming out of Verifice Orify, and also with the fact that when you turn the safety on, the disconnector breaks, and sometimes that hammer falls when you take it out of safe. Not good. Let's go. I got to tell you straight, this is going to be one of those apps where we're not going to shoot these things because we don't have any ammo that's under 100 years old for them yet. We'll talk about that later. You all know I can't let you see what it takes to make the ammo on this platform. That doesn't mean I'm not coming up with other answers. Anyway, seen this picture before? Yes, you have. This is a Steyr Hahn and what everyone else would call a Roth Steyr. I tend to call it a Krinka. It is what it is. It doesn't matter. This one is pristine. This one has been run over by a truck. So this is a different show for another day because there's really nothing wrong with it. It doesn't have to be conserved. It doesn't have to be do anything. We'll show it to you later. But what we're going to concentrate on is bringing this World War I vintage beauty back a little bit. The Romanian crest had been ground off of this thing, and they did a bad job of it. They electro-penciled in numbering here. They electro-penciled it in on the drawing. And there's just, like I said in the intro, there's gack oozing out the back end of this thing. The safety doesn't work. So step one is pretty much going to be tearing it down. Okay, so there's a latch over here on this side that gets depressed and shoved through, and you have to pull this all the way out. And I gotta see if I got the fingernails for that. Yeah, I'm probably just gonna punch it out. There you go. So now we have this out. They've even provided us with a really cool arrow to tell us which way it goes in. And then we cock the hammer, and I've received some instructions for this. The slide comes off the back, and the barrel pops out. And that's pretty much all there is to failed stripping this thing. We are, of course, going to go significantly deeper, like we usually do. Unusual setup on this barrel is that in order for it to lock, the barrel rotates. So you see the 2 locking lugs on top like you have on a 1911. As the barrel comes to the rear, it unlocks, and then the slide continues its trip all the way to the back. Pretty much. This is the aforementioned ooze I was talking about. It's coming out right here. We oiled it, but oiling it it wasn't enough. We got to get it the rest of the way apart. There are other things we can tear off of this, but I'm guessing the first thing we're going to do is take the spring pressure off and then take the grips off and see what we can see. This is a stripper clip loaded gun. It runs, it's got its magazine built into it. It's kind of innovative. This wall right here, as you pull down on this, it actually removes the left side support for the cartridges. The cartridges will spew out the top of this thing. It is what it is. It needs to be loaded through strippers that we don't have yet. We just wanted to get you guys inside the gun first. Because it has an integral magazine, I don't know what removing this grip is going to actually do. But I'm going to take it off here because I'm telling you, I'm in uncharted waters here. All right, so we're going to pop that out. And I know from having looked at it that that screw is engaging a hole in this side. And I don't know whether or not that's threaded just into the wood or it's threaded into a clip. Okay, so that screw comes out. And then the grips appear to slide off the bottom like this. Well, that's interesting as all get out. They're dovetailed, see that? So the grips are dovetailed into this. So they're not, all they're depending upon that screw for is vertical capture and not for side to side, up and down. That's fascinating. Okay, these will have to be, we're gonna checker these. We're gonna lightly chase the checkering on these. We're not gonna redo them, but we are gonna point them up a little bit. This is just maintenance that's gotta be done. Okay, next step is to let the hammer down, and then this bar comes off. This is the transfer bar, and then up inside, this transfer bar is acting on a lever that is what's transferring the load to the actual sear. Bruno has a fabulous animation on this gun. And let me say something about Bruno's animations right here, just for whatever I want to tell. He does a very, very good job of illustrating the function of guns, but you cannot take his animation files and use them as a blueprint to print anything. They're not how he works. We were asked that by our patrons. I've been asked that by a couple of guys on YouTube. He'll give you the file, but you can't build anything off of it. And that's the thing I just wanted to say there. All right. I think we're going to get up on a vise to go any further because we still got a lot of spring tension to deal with. And I'm interested to see how the creators of this weapon dealt with that. You have the frame up in the universal work holding device. And the first thing you do when you're taking a gun apart that you've never seen before is try to identify where all the spring force is. All right. So in this particular case, we know we've got a pretty heavy duty spring pushing up on this follower. We know that there is a very heavy spring, a mainspring in this thing. These guys were not bashful about kissing primers. The next thing I'm looking at is what appears to be the fact that that spring moves when the triggers move. So I'm thinking that the rear end of the action spring is actually what's powering the trigger. Now I've done a little bit of research since I've been off camera, and I know that if you pop this disconnector up, this ejector should come out. There we go. And that gravity assisted to the floor, but that's okay. So this is the ejector block, and then this is the transfer bar. And I gotta tell you, some of these parts in this gun start looking familiar. So this is retained because that goes in. Now I did a little bit of looking. I did a little bit of research because remember, a bucking book saves a grand. It's stupid here, okay? So these two pop out. We'll lay them on the bench. And then it appears as if this grip screw, when stuck through, is retaining this entire cassette here. So we have, you see that line around there, that's being retained. So what I think we're going to be able to do is lift this out the top. And again, I'm going to tell you I did a little bit of research here. And I think we should be able to take a very light grade punch and get on this thing and very lightly persuade it out. Now it's a gazillion years old and it's filthy. So I'm just gonna, yeah, there it goes. So there's still tension on the spring, and we're just kind of interested to know whether or not, as we start milking this up, yep, all of the weight is off the hammer already. So this thing's just coming out as a great big cassette. And I'm not hitting it very hard. I'm just milking it up with a 2-ounce ball peen. Hear the pitch changing. Yeah. I had to get my hand in front of you there. And we'll see here. I don't want to create any other issues. We'll get in there. See if we can keep lifting it. Or is it going to stop me here? It's going to stop me. We are loose now. We're all the way back there. There's no tension on that. And the question becomes is how hard do I want to hit it? And I'm going to hit it harder. Let me get on that surface. Okay, so it's just a matter of angle. We can see that it's coming. And nothing feels like it's getting ready to explode here. That's obviously the mag spring coming up. Nothing feels like it's getting ready to go sproing on me. So I can just keep milking this down. Okay. So when we go back in, that'll obviously have to be compressed. So here's what you got. Oh, man. Ugh. All right. This is the hammer spring. This is the disconnector. And this also has on its disconnector on the back nose of it, I think that ledge right there is actually the sear. And then this particular spring right here is keeping the, this is for the follower, and that's lifting up on this surface here. It's lifting that and making the ejector want to go up. Seeing as much as this gun, and I'm not claiming anything, but by the time you get out 1912, 1913 into World War I, most of the ideas of how to do this have been flushed out already. Anybody that's ever had a 1911 apart has seen the three-finger spring. All right, the next place I'm going to choose to go is go after the hammer pivot pin. Now, this thing was, I don't know, it's almost like it would hang the slide up on the way forward because it was almost like there is a sharp edge coming forward right here. I think those two silver surfaces were grabbing the hammer and just ever so slightly holding the slide up going forward. We're not going to make any decisions. We're not going to move any metal. We're not going to file anything until we get this thing apart and we get it clean. All right, I'm just going to see if that screw is going to fight us or not. I got to go to a better screwdriver because that was the wrong screwdriver tip for that. Here we go. There we go. So what I'm looking for when I'm doing this is I'm looking to see, is this hammer wobbling while I'm taking it out? Is the screw kind of going around like this, you know, where it's hula hooping? And I don't feel that. It does have its usual amount of just yak all over it. I mean, ugh. But not nearly as bad as a lot of these guns that we've taken apart. Now, safety, I don't know. There's a split pin here in the back. It's split. So it looks like to me like that's like a finger. So as we roll it around, we ought to be able to find a position where it will come out. So I'm going to apply a little bit of force here on the back. And somewhere in here, there's going to be a spot. There it is, right there. There's going to be a spot in there where it feels like it's going to want to come out. We'll just gently take this out and make sure. Now I'm going to cover this because if there's a pin about to blow up, I want it to blow up into my hands. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what we thought it was. It's a split pin and it comes back through a hole. I just want to make sure there wasn't a plunger and a small spring mudcat in here waiting to bite me in the butt. All right, we're getting close to having all the parts out of this. There's a plug up here in the front that I'm guessing knocks out. This plug, I think, comes out the front and it brings the recoil spring with it. All right, so I did just a brief amount of research and I figured, okay, if the other one's a split pin, this one might be too. So if we push in on this, this is an engagement surface right here. So this thing locks in like that. So if we push in a little bit and depress that, that comes down and liberates the recoil spring. So that lock and plunger right there holds that in. You'll notice the dramatic lack of threaded fasteners in this thing. There are not a whole lot of threaded fasteners in this particular gun. So that's the recoil spring right there. This is a flat. See, the coils are flat. So this is like a very small rectangular piece of steel. So it's a rectangular torsion bar that's been wrapped around a stud here. I've already begun to partially rotate this spring out of the way. And this is that left wall magazine feed lip. And I'm guessing that this is going to come the rest of the way out like that. This is a canted piece, so when it slides up on the back end of this, there's a thrust factor that tends to want to push that up. So I'm thinking step one's going to be take that off, and then step two is going to be to slide this out. All right, that's going to come out there. I just had to make sure I wasn't going to drop it on the ground. So that little hook there is the left feed lip, and you have the ability to slide it down out of the way and eject all the cartridges or leave it up. I can see this as a potential weakness in this setup. I don't know. Once we've done that, all that's left is knocking that pin out right there, and that's going to drop the trigger out. I'm going to do my damnedest here to show you something. We got a pin to drive, and we've been building a muzzleloader in this shop here for a couple of days, and the face of this hammer has been used on chisel duty. So this is a smooth cut Nicholson from way back, and all I'm doing now, if this hammer face was as hard as everybody swears it is, I would not be able to cut the face of this off with a file. Hammer faces shouldn't be hardened. Okay, play with it. There we go. So what I'm going after is a couple of these speckles in here. I'm just trying to get rid of them. There's actually a, let me see if I can get the mic right by it. Yeah, there's some sticking points in there. So that's what I'm polishing off. So there was some conversation the other day. You guys have probably heard, never hit a hammer with another hammer, and that is very true. Because what you have to look at is where the energy is going. So don't ever, and I'm not even going to do it in jest, don't take these two bad boys and just hit them together like this. Because when you do that, the energy has nowhere to go, and it'll spall bits of metal off the face, and that's bad. However, if I'm hitting this with this and there's something underneath it taking the energy like a rivet, then it becomes a punch with a wooden handle on it. That's my take on it. I'm sure a lot of people that have never either taken the time to think it out or whatever will get a little uptight about that, but this hammer face shouldn't be hard as a rock. Okay. Now, one of the easiest ways to not screw something up is to not screw it up in the first place. So you never let these hammers get that bad. Okay. Start buffing off those cross pieces. Trying to get you guys a better, there it is right there. So you see these cross hatches that are going across, they're going this way. Wait a minute, I'm 90 degrees out of phase here. They're going this way, all right? So what I'm trying to do is just rough that off. Now there's a cheater's way to do this, and it's one of those little Dremel sanding gizmos for building models, and I've got one of those, but all of these hammers were initially brought down, and we'll back this with some, all these hammers were initially brought down by hand, and you just keep cross hatching. Again, I know you're watching my hands move, but you see how I'm like rocking the paper like this? You want to get it good all the way out to the edges. See, that's starting to look a lot better. It's kind of frosty, and it'll come down to about 600 grit or so. They don't have to be totally mirrored, but see, it has to be smooth. So again, we'll look at, I got all the lights off up above us to show you that this is smooth, you see. There you go. Now, the resolution on this is so good you can actually see the sanding dust, but what I want you to see is you can actually see the image of my thumb in the top of that hammer. And that's kind of what it ought to look like. Now, you can do the same thing on the peen side, although this guy is already pretty darn good on the peen side. You can see my reflection in it. Again, the camera is allowing you to see things that you can't see with your naked eye. So why all of this? Well, we're going to do a bit of a camera move here, and you see how that pin is sticking out ever so slightly? These hemispherical pins are set up in such a way, on most guns, you have an opportunity to use a zero length punch. So you take this hammer that we have just polished at pretty decent expense, and we're going to smack down on that pin. And that's just going to allow us to get it moving. So you take the biggest hammer you can physically get, and you walk it right, not under the pin, but right next to it. That will give us mass to allow me. And you see how we just drove that pin down flush, and we drove it down flush because we didn't put any marks on that pin head. Now we graduate to a short punch that won't flex. All right. Now we've got that driven down, and oh, by the way, we can see all the gack we're going after here. So that pin's starting to come out the other side, and then you can go to a long punch that fits in the hole. Get my hand around behind here. Now I'm at a point now where I'm swinging that hammer pretty hard because that doesn't want to go through. Go up 2 hammer sizes. Just go up 2 hammer sizes, because all we're trying to do is just drop the hammer. I gotta get this set up a little bit stiffer. We're just dropping the hammer on it. Okay, and then bring my hand down underneath it down here and grab the pin and just pop it through. Now, don't just jerk this punch out of the hole, because God only knows what is spring loaded up against that. You don't know. So now you can take it out in a controlled format and catch anything that may or may not have flown out. And I'm guessing that this has got to go out the top. There's nothing. Let's see where we got to go here. It's got to go out the bottom. There's no other way. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay. So this pivots down into the bottom of the frame, kicks out like that, and we can see the real golden wonder that is the inside of parts of a gun that haven't been disassembled in 100 years. Okay, see how I gack in there? That's why we tore the gun all the way down, was to get it this. So once we get all this out of here and we get this thing put back together again, then we can make some decisions about whether or not parts are worn, or they just were not allowed to move their full extension because of, well, all this Glock. So here we have a 1911, wait a minute, this is a 1913 Steyr. And that faux pas was because most of the major parts in the 1911 are sitting here. They had gotten automatic handguns down to pretty much the lowest number of parts you could get. I mean, you're the whole lock, stock, and barrel deal, where you got a frame, you got a slide, you got a barrel, you got a gizmo that pushes the cartridges up into the barrel, you got gizmos that make all the things that make the cartridges go off, and you've got a set of grips. Yeah. All right. 2 things I think we got to do with this gun. There are a lot of, yeah, look at that. This slide has had the living crud ground off of it, and I'm about to show you just how much. The finish almost looks like it was Parkerized. The ship sailed on this thing. This is not an original priceless antique. This is a Hahn that's kind of had the living crap run out of it, and the only thing that kept it from dying is nobody wants to either make the ammo for it or can find any, and that's pretty much what stopped it from dying. All right, so what we'll do There's no active rust on this gun anywhere. There's just some cosmoline. We'll go ahead and we won't even convert it. We're just going to clean it off with some chemicals and talk about what we're going to do with the metal. And then while the metal, we're going to blue this gun. We'll talk about what we're going to do with the grips while the bluing is converting out. And we'll go from there. But first, over to the vise. I want to show you something. That sliver of light right there represents just how much metal got taken off the side of this slide right there. That's a lot of metal that got ground, and we're not going to be able to put it back. See, the other side had almost no metal taken off of it. You know, depends on how I'm holding this. I'm trying to look in the monitor and show this to you. There's a lot of rounding that's been done in here as the old crests were ground off the side of this. Which was necessary. I mean, you know, the Brits did it, everybody did it. When the government doesn't own it anymore, grind it off. But that leaves us with a unique problem. If we have a pit right here on the surface of a piece of metal, in order to get rid of that pit, you have to grind out an area that's almost this big. And then we're going to go for this pit, and then we have to grind that over back down into there. And what it does is it just makes a wavy surface. Metal has to be finished first. So you finish, then you roll or mark everything, and then you blue. So what'll happen is if you get out of order, you get out of this sequence right here, and you roll mark something into this, it's going to raise up a bump, it's going to get down into a valley, and it's going to raise up a bump. This Smith & Wesson right here has not been buffed or polished. However, if you polish, that wheel will roll like this, and it will take this whole side out. So round holes will look like they're ovals. So let's go and take a look at what that looks like. Yeah, and you can tell now as we're dashing back and forth between these pictures or whatever Bruno's doing. Do some of that editing shit, Bruno. You'll be able to see what it looks like when it's polished and what it isn't. And I'm telling you, to God that knows what he's looking like, you can see it from across the room. The ship sailed on this thing. It's been ground on. It's been buffed on. It's been... I mean, right there, you want to see the pits? Right there, look at that. There's one there, there's one there. There was some corrosion here that they tried to grind out. The whole side of this frame has been just ground. And it shows. So the ship sailed. You're never going to make this thing look new. It's only new one time. So I'm guessing about the best we can do. Just used a little bit of backed crocus cloth and start cutting through. We can see here, let me get that light in the right spot. There's a big old hunk of old corrosion pitting there. There's old corrosion pitting there. There's stuff up on the top. This gun had been orange once. It had been orange, and there's nothing we're going to be able to do about it. Now, with that, everything that I showed you about buffing and pulling out the lettering, when you're with a backed piece of sandpaper, you don't get that effect. And in a little bit, once I get the big edges, you can see there's actually a line. You can see a line right here where whatever it was they used to grind the crest off of this thing. And we're pretty sure it was Romanian. Whenever they ground that off, they ground it off with extreme prejudice. It come off hard. So all we're going to do here, we're not going to mirror finish this thing. We're going to get all the scratches out of it that are going that way. I want to get all the scratches on this slide running one way, and then we're going to take this thing over to over to our acquaintances, over to Brian's place, and we're going to put this on his bead blaster, not a sand blaster. It's a bead blaster. And what we'll do is basically paint it. We won't be removing any material. Sandblasting removes material. What we want to do is make all of this flat. And then matte finish it with the beads, and then we're gonna rust boot the thing. See, they didn't roll out of that. There we go. And now that high line that was running across there, let's get this right. There was a line running right through here that I've gotten mostly rid of. So then we'll continue to polish to take those file scratches off. Try to get this close. You can do this with power, but with great power comes great ability to tear stuff up. So I like to do things by hand, which is why it takes so damn long to do things. Now, one of the things I don't want to do that I can see that you can't, and let me get this lit again. There's a line right here, and I'm trying to keep that line there. These originals were not rolled over. That was a distinct vertical surface meeting a curved surface at a distinctive place. A lot of that ship has sailed here, you see, but there is a distinct line right there, and there is one up there, and it's supposed to be on the other side too. So I'll maybe try to come in and get rid of some of these other bumps here, and then after that, we're gonna go bead blast this thing because, well, let's just say the owner of this gun got what he paid for, and he bought a very, very nice example of a Krinka, and they threw this on the pile just to make the deal a little bit sweeter. So this gun was essentially free. And I bet you the seller all the way out the door was going, sucker, because he knew we were going to have to make them ammo for it. Okay, so the top of the slide has got a lot of, there's pitting. The entire front sight's been hacked up pretty bad. On this side, let me get the light right. Yeah, more pitting. And then there's a row of pitting running right down the top here. You can't get. You can't go after it. That damage was done. If you sand that down, you'll make that nice and smooth, and it will look like a table lamp in a French whorehouse. We're at the bead blasting cabinet. What we're going to attempt to do is smooth not smooth it out, but just make the texture even across it all. I buffed part of it out now so we can get rid of most of the streaks. This is going to be loud. I'm not going to talk much, but we're using glass beads here. This is not sand. So there's another phenomenon that happens here. Is when the roll marks are put down on the metal, metal is localized, surface hardened where the roll marks are going, and you're able to actually detect that when you're bead blasting, in that some areas will remain shiny because they've been literally work hardened. And that's an issue when you're going to grind off parts of the metal surface, is that the areas around the lettering are harder than the surrounding areas, and you get all these ebbs and flows. Typically, you wouldn't put rust bluing solution on your workbench, but this is one of the most photogenic places in the shop still, and I don't have, it's back in the back there. It's not ready for prime time. All right, so you just take a ball of cotton, and you squeeze this rust blue down into it. And all we're doing is just applying bluing solution. But I'm going slow on this gun because I want to have a thick, heavily done, well laid out blue. It's going to take 2 to 3 passes. It will take the rest of the day, even though I'm going to push this in Thor. But I want to make the most out of having Bruno here, because he's going to have to come back another day in order to finish this. But you would just work through this and put a thin application of this on everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and unhook this. It's thin. You don't use a lot of it. I'm using the American formula because the American formula seems to work best on this steel. I don't know why. My normal go-to is the Damascus formula, but I haven't put anything on. So what we're really doing is applying a chloride in the presence of oxygen. So you've got to have a way for chloride corrosion to occur. And this is essentially what happens down at the beach. So we're putting a little bit of a chloride, we're putting an oxidizer, and a vehicle, which is water, and just a smidge of grain alcohol, because it makes this stuff wet a lot better. Anyway, you get the gist of it. This is a very, very poor setup for me to try to maneuver around this. I will now go cut this loose and hang it somewhere and get this solution on everything. You don't need a lot of it. For those of you who are a certain age, just pretend it's Bro Cream. A little dab will do ya. So I've run the water level down in Thor, and I'm just gonna let this stuff sit in here and steam at just ambient conditions and let it get good. And it had already started turning black on me. It's been about 2 hours now, and it's time to go ahead and peel off the first layer. And the minute that stuff gets near the steam, it starts turning black, and we're just gonna let that go. But this is gonna take into tomorrow, because it's gonna have to rust for another couple hours. It's already about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Whatever. It takes Bruno and I days to make one of these things, but nobody knows that. Well, one of the things we're trying to do here while we're bluing the metal is double use the time. And a lot of guys are saying that they want to, I want to be a gunsmith. Okay, well, you have to learn how to manage time. And I'll tell you what, I still take too damn long. So in this particular case, all we're doing is getting the lines all the way to the bottom. You see the lines are missing up in here because they were never cut that deeply to begin with. And the whole idea is to just make this look better without making it look like I messed with it. And that's the real issue there. I can't see these lines up in here. I can't see them. So I'm going every other line. And the reason for that is that some of them show up, some of them don't. And I put a really long, this is one of Mr. Allman's checkering tools, and I've got a really, really long shoe on this thing. And it lets me connect the dots and get all these lines parallel, and it's all very optical. Get that in there. And then the human eye actually is very, very, very good at subdividing distance. So now I know that even though I can't see that line when it runs up in between these two, I can come back, and then all I have to do is optically split that distance. And if I optically split that distance, the lines come out pretty good. It's got to go that way a little bit. And if I just get back on here where the line was and then start driving this, I can optically split it in half. And it works pretty good because now it keeps all of my errors split in between those two lines instead of having my errors compound. And we tolerance stack this thing out the back end, and it looks like a lot of that original L.C. Smith checkering, which was done in a hurry. There we go, almost got it. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, get this in about where I think it was, and Bruno's going to do a before and after right now. A little bit of cutting has made quite the difference. Not much. We're not going really deep. I'm not going to point these. I'm not going to scrub the original varnish off of them because there's still some left. But we did have to come in here and tighten this up. Now, if you just heard an alarm go off in the background, that's telling me to go back and take a look in Thor and what we got converting back there. It'll go off again in another 2 or 3 minutes. The PLC will just cycle it back around and off it goes. So I have the luxury of continuing on target here. You can see up in here, I'm still parallel. All these lines are parallel, even though there's nothing up there. And I think I'm going to get through this without having to respace it. The real problem is there are still people that think you can spend $75 for that Parker, spend another $100 on having it quote fixed, and it'll be worth 2,500 bucks, guys. You can't do it. This is what this is. All we are attempting to do is put really high quality lipstick on the pig. Well, here you go. We cleaned it up a little bit. It tightened up. It is what it is. It's a 100-and-something-year-old weapon, and it's nasty, but we got all the hues down to the same color at least. I think the grip's tightened right up. Compared, you're not in the room with it, but compared to what it looked like being in the room with it to what it looks like now, I think it's definitely an improvement. It's going to have to come back apart and go for one more pass. There's some silicone that I think that got impregnated down into this bluing. There's a little rough spot up here by my thumb, but in all, I would say this is a pretty good save. Steyr Hahn, and as always, all pleasure.